Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. The Outdoor Minimalist podcast has a goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. In episode 55 of the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, we get to talk about stewardship marketing, public land access for varying user groups, and how we can use our individual strengths to make a collective impact for good. Any type of branding or brand marketing is always super interesting to me, so I was really excited when this idea for the episode was brought to my attention by Becky Marcelliano. Becky is the Senior Access and Stewardship Marketing Manager for Onyx. Her love of the outdoors started in the hills of New Jersey, but bigger mountains drew her to the Mountain West, where she spent the last 2 decades doing a multitude of things, including teaching environmental education, guiding wilderness travel trips, and managing marketing teams for various outdoor brands in the industry. She's driven by human connection, our wild spaces, and purpose-driven initiatives. She's a Jane of all trades adventurer and master of none. You can find her outside hiking, mountain biking, backpacking, off-roading, or throwing a fly rod on any given day. Supercharge your dog's mealtime with Neobites functional dog food toppers. Neobites unlocks the unique power of cricket protein to promote firm poops, a thick and shiny coat, and everyday vitality for your pup. With a powder format, these toppers can easily be mixed into existing foods to make mealtime more exciting. Cricket, a hypoallergenic and humane protein, is not only a better option for your pup, but it's better for the planet too, producing virtually no greenhouse gases and using fractions of the resources used by traditional proteins. Check out Neobites products on Amazon and at eatneobites.com. Use the discount code CRICKET15 for 15% off your next order. And then use the code Outdoor Minimalist for 10% off every order after that. So thank you for joining me today, Becky. I've really been looking forward to this conversation, but before we jump into everything, can you just tell me a little bit about how you got involved in outdoor recreation and a few of the ways you like to spend time outdoors?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Meg. I'm really excited to be here with you and have this conversation. I grew up in New Jersey in a large family, and we just played outside a lot as kids, building snow forts, catching salamanders, things like that, and then one thing led to another. So I'm definitely in the camp of being really fortunate to have found wild experiences from a young age. And then that led me to move west for college and study the environment in college and then make my way into the outdoor industry full time. So it's really been one thing after the next and just kind of chasing the next grand adventure, the next outdoor job, which has led me to where I am today. And I'm very much a jack of all trades adventurer. I like to hike and mountain bike. I learned how to fly fish a couple years ago. I do a little bit of off-roading and just really like to be outside and whatever opportunities come up and whatever friends and partners and family members I can pull along the way with me. So that's my backstory on what led me to the outdoors.
Awesome. Yeah. And you don't live out east anymore. You live somewhere in the west from what I remember. So where are you located now?
Yeah, I now live outside of Salt Lake City, Utah.
Awesome. I love Salt Lake City.
Yeah, it's a great place.
And did you always work in the outdoor industry or how did you get there?
I did not. So I actually have a dual degree in both environmental studies and fine arts. And then I went on to do a master's program in art education and then moved into art education as my first career. And I did that for 6 years alongside a lot of seasonal and summer and part-time jobs in the outdoor space. So I was guiding wilderness trips and working in bike shops, teaching environmental ed, things like that. And somewhere along the way, 6 years into my public education career, decided that I didn't want to do that forever, that I really wanted to dive headfirst into the outdoor industry full time. And somewhat ironically, took my first ever desk job as I entered the outdoor industry full time. And that's where I've been ever since. But desk job aside, there's a lot of wonderful outdoor opportunities that still come along with working behind a computer most of the time.
Yes, I agree with that because I also work behind a computer most of the time.
Yeah.
So now you work with Onyx, and that is quite the transition. Can you talk a little bit about what Onyx is for people that maybe haven't heard of them or they've heard of them and aren't exactly sure what it is that you guys do and what your role is with them?
Yeah, so Onyx is a mapping and navigation company with both desktop and mobile apps that are built for recreationalists of all types. We actually got started in the hunting space, then moved into building apps for off-roaders, both winter and summer. And then more recently, just in the last couple years, started the backcountry app, which is designed for human-powered sports, hiking, backpacking, and backcountry skiing. And Onyx has an incredible depth of data of all sorts, but we're often well known for our data in land ownership. You can see in the app what type of land you're on or whose land you're on. And we really honed this originally because as a hunter, you really need to know where you are wandering about in the woods to make sure you don't accidentally step into private property as you're trying to chase your elk or something like that. So that's where that began. And then we also then moved that into really understanding the importances of what that means for an off-roader or a camper as you cruise down a dirt road. For example, trying to find that great dispersed camp spot. You want to make sure you're really on the right land where dispersed camping is allowed. So that's a little bit about Onyx. I am the Senior Access and Stewardship Manager for Onyx, and so I work across all three of those verticals, hunt, off-road, and backcountry, and I sit on the brand marketing team. So my role is built around work and storytelling that's really purpose-driven based on what we care about most as a brand, which is access and stewardship. And when we talk about access, we're talking about how to protect and conserve the physical and legal access that we have to the public lands we all love. And then stewardship is much more of that human responsibility part about how we use these lands and how to get out there safely, responsibly, and sustainably. So my job encompasses a lot of things. I'm very much a strategic jack of all trades marketer. So I do various things like running large campaigns for us, telling brand stories, building partnerships, hosting events, giving grants that all tie back to this mission that we have as a brand to protect the lands that we all love to recreate on.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that wonderful description. And for anyone that is curious about it or hasn't seen it before, I'll make sure I share links to the apps and your guys' website in the show notes so people can look at that there. And it is really cool to me that just kind of during the brand's growth that it has become like a very multifaceted, I guess, focus within the industry just to like span across all of those different interests because you don't always see that. But it's relevant for everyone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So with your specific focus and Onyx having a big focus on stewardship in general, like you mentioned, I really want to talk about how brand stewardship fits into general marketing for your guys' organization. You can kind of branch into like why it's important for everyone, but I guess for this specific question, just Onyx would be kind of good.
Yeah, it has fit naturally into the Onyx brand from day one as a pillar that was established by our founder. And really access is everything for outdoor sports, right? Without public lands, how would we be able to cruise down those dirt roads? How would we be able to hike or backcountry ski? And we talk a lot about, as a brand, how we can use our brand reach and our brand strength to inform our audiences about responsible recreation and inspire them to be good stewards with this premise that collective stewardship preserves our wild places and thus protects our access for generations to come. But it really was built into the brand as a really key initiative and something that we stood for from the very beginning of Onyx. So how exactly does it fit into our marketing? We have a super robust marketing team in all facets. We have growth marketers, email marketers that manage athletes, partnerships, influencer programs, paid media, earned media, all the usual things. And then there's our brand marketing team, which is not about that quick sale revenue generation right now type of elements, but it's more about that long-term play. And we are the ones on the brand marketing team that figure out what we care about, how we message, how we give back as a brand and as a company to ultimately build brand loyalty over time. So we really aim to be a brand that is loved, one that's built on purpose and do-goodery, trust, and passion, And that's exactly where access and stewardship fits in for us, is to really elevate all of those things.
So if someone else from any other company, I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be in the outdoor industry, but most listeners are part of the outdoor industry, so we'll stay there. What, in your opinion, does that good stewardship marketing exactly look like? And how does a company not, I guess, branch too far out and make sure that it's still aligning with a message that really resonates with their target audience?
Yeah, this is such a really important and critical thing to think about as a marketer, but also as somebody that has power in how we spend our dollars as a consumer. Because we really want to align with brands and push out messaging as marketers and as brands that is authentic and that feels really good to us in the right ways. So when I first came to Onyx and built the stewardship program for Onyx Off-Road, one element of my strategic plan was to lay out a what is it not framework. And this included messaging, tone, verbiage to use, like all of those good things. And we determined that what it's not is a list of no's or a list of don't do's. Like nobody likes to be told all the things that they should not do when they're going outside to play. And in addition to that, we didn't want it to sound desperate or preachy or unattainable for people. So then we shifted into, okay, well, what is it? How really do we do this in a way that felt best to us and really native to us as Onyx? We wanted things to be educational, empowering, digestible, relatable, with that like slight sense of urgency, just enough to really light the spark for people to latch onto the duty that we each have to actually bring personal stewardship action to life. So I think that good stewardship marketing is really finding a balance in what the brand can own as unique versus leveraging and partnering with organizations who are already experts in that space, like Leave No Trace and Tread Lightly. And those organizations have already created the frameworks, the educational programs, the philosophies, the principles. So who are we to reinvent that wheel, right? Like that was never our intention, and that's really not helpful. So rather, we wanted to build our stewardship comms in a way that called on those established stewardship truths, if you will, and credit them, but then deliver information in ways that really speak exactly to our audiences at Onyx. So, we have the power to reach a lot of people, and we can create content that is exciting and informative, and that's helpful for the greater good to help move all of us forward towards this cause. And we can also use our apps to lean into stewardship too, which is important. We have layers built into our apps that indicate live wildfires or road obstacles or slope angles for backcountry skiers. And keeping people safe out there is good stewardship in itself. And we're really proud to be able to do that through our product itself.
I love that. And I love that it seems very accessible and it spans across every aspect of the brand. But while you were talking, I was just kind of thinking, because I think this way sometimes about the Outdoor Minimalist, is do you ever feel like you are kind of preaching to the choir, or you're like marketing to people that they would be the people that already care about this? Or how do you, I guess, move through that mindset and reach people that would be a little bit outside of that general sphere of already knowing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the important thing to note there is that being a good steward is like a journey. There's so many different scenarios that we encounter out there, and each one provides an opportunity to act. So if you're someone that's just starting out on your journey of stewardship or learning what that all means, like that's wonderful. What an important place to be. And if you're an old pro, like that's amazing too. And then I'd challenge you to lead the way for others through formal or informal methods of educating others. So I think no matter where you are along the way, just be there and own that and figure out how you can kind of do the right things out there and bring people and buoy people around you to also like do those good things simultaneously alongside of you.
Yeah. And this kind of directly relates, I guess, to my next question, which is relating to the idea that the more that someone gets outside, or the more that you recreate and participate in all of these sports that bring so much joy outside, the more you will inherently care about it and want to protect it and participate in stewardship or conservation. But when is that actually relevant and true, and when isn't it?
Yeah, I really think that this is such a fascinating thing to talk about, like what causes conservation or what leads to conservation, right? I do think it would be very hard for someone to be an earth steward without ever having really experienced our wild places. they simply won't have that connection, that understanding, that buy-in to those wild places. And so I absolutely think that experiencing outdoor recreation is a very critical step along the path to conservation. Because when people are out there, whether they're mountain biking or paragliding or sailing or duck hunting or topping out on a mountain summit, they really start to see bigger and connect deeper. Senses become keener, they breathe deeper, and like somehow along the way of all of that, they become more confident people and more empowered and more at peace with what's going on with our world. And I know that's like a very glorified statement, but over time, I believe this to be true, that we all gain so much value in being outside. But this alone, I don't think leads to actual conservation. I think the missing link here is education of how to recreate in ways that are sustainable for our public lands and our communities. I think we as humans like innately know how to move through nature, but we might not know the rules of stewardship, like how far to pee from a stream or why it's bad to throw your apple cores into the woods. So I think that education component is really critical to give those moments of nature connection some semblance of tangibility and structure and offer guiding rules to follow. And I think that allows people to really take it to the next level and put things into practice. So my opinion on all of this is I think the ticket to conservation is threefold. I think first, we really do need to get outside and explore and find those nature connection moments that we all love so much. Then we need to have education of what good looks like and how to actually take action on that and do it. And then we also cannot forget about all of the formalized programming and organizations and land managers that are actually working to do the maintenance of our public lands and our trails and so on, that are involved in the litigation to keep access open, to preserve the public lands themselves. So I think it's really threefold to get from recreation and then all the way to a really good model that truly is living and breathing and thriving a conservation of the places we love.
Yeah. And I think that's probably things that many marketing teams in the outdoor industry are probably asking themselves when they're talking about stewardship marketing in general and kind of like aligning it with your values and how to spread that message effectively. And also, like you were saying, kind of like playing on your strengths as a brand. You kind of mentioned a few things earlier about Onyx that are interesting and really set you guys apart. And one of those is the amount of data that you guys have in terms of outdoor spaces and general access. And so like when you're forming these brand strategies and stewardship marketing, how do you use that strength and that information to solve those problems?
Yes, I think that is an ongoing topic of thought and ideation that we have at Onyx all the time, right? Like tech is such a dynamic field and there's always more work to be done and always more things to integrate into our product to give back more to these causes. But for now, we collect data through many sources, such as through government agencies, acquisition of other mapping properties, and also our own GIS team's hard work. And we give people navigational information that in itself is an underlying method of safety and stewardship. Providing tools that inform people as they go outside is stewardship in itself, but that's definitely not all encompassing, right? That's just one element of being prepared out there. So we're also always thinking about other ways to provide stewardship tips and tricks to our users and really reach people in those moments. For example, on some heavily used off-road trails in Sedona, we have stewardship reminders that are built into the trail information that we give our app users. And so when that off-roader is at that trailhead about to do that trail ride, they can see in their specific notes and tips and tricks that we worked with Tread Lightly to build out so that they have those tips and tricks right at their fingertips when they're really in that moment of using our app and driving down that trail. So that's just one way that we can try to integrate and use the power of our app for good. And then outside of our apps, we have a lot of other initiatives that allow us to give back to various access and stewardship projects. You know, the obvious one is, sure, let's give a bunch of money to organizations who are doing the stewardship work. And that's really important because they're often the experts in that work or that project. They're the boots on the ground. And so we can help support them through philanthropic offerings and gestures and fundings to actually bring those things to life. So that is an important part of what we do. We also have a grant program that supports specific projects that really help gain and open access for acres and trail miles that are used for recreation. So that grant program is pretty neat. And then we can use our marketing engine too to educate our consumers and engage them in ways to give back that makes sense for them. Maybe that is donating, maybe that is activating themselves in a project or cleanup. So it has to be really multifaceted, I think, to really get the best impact for the problem that we're trying to solve. So absolutely, we always try to use our app and continue to build those tools out, as well as utilizing the other strengths of Onyx and what we have to give to our communities.
Yeah, I like that it's kind of just normalizing the conversation and making the exposure very high for Onyx users. So if it's just built in to the natural landscape of the app and the map and everything like that, it can more easily be on top of mind of people because they're being reminded of it over and over again, which I think is really nice.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes very needed. A lot of times we need all those reminders, of how to do things.
Yes.
We consume so much information. So I think reminders can't hurt.
Absolutely. So, I mean, when you're building these plans and strategies as a brand, you pointed out a lot of really good things and identifying strong points of interest and just general strengths within the company. So, if there's another brand that is working on their stewardship marketing, how do you think they can best pinpoint their unique point of difference for that?
Yeah, this is such an important thing to dig into as a brand as you go about building out what you can do. And I think there's a lot of elements of stewardship to get on board with and a lot of variability between sports, even as far as like what's important or what's needed for those sports or those communities or those types of landscapes. And the reality is any brand or any one person simply can't do it all. We cannot give to every organization. Our time only goes so far. So I think the best thing that brands can do is to, when they're building up their purpose-driven marketing, I think the best ones know exactly what they stand for, and their initiatives are really targeted. The strategy of like, go deep on the thing that matters most to that brand rather than a dabble across many different things that are important and worthy, but you can't just do it all. So for Onyx, that thing is promoting good stewardship and protecting our access for recreation. And those two things are very much tied together. But as a brand, that is our North Star, and everything we do and everything we give always ties back to that one thing of, are we promoting stewardship and are we protecting access? One brand that I love so much that does this extremely well is United by Blue. And they pick up 1 pound of trash out of our oceans for every item they sell. And it's really simple and it's really clean for a lack of a pun on words, but they just nail it. They know exactly what they stand for, and they have this one initiative that creates a massive impact to clean up our ocean. So that's just one example of a brand that I think really knows who they are and what they stand for and does that, in a really like concise double down kind of way. So I think it's a brand's duty to figure out what they care about, how to most impactfully give to that mission, and then to do what you can. Like a small emerging brand won't be able to do as much of a big brand, of course, but we're all in this together, and owning where you're at as a brand and what size you're at and what you can give, and then doing that as well as you can is the key.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I'm glad that you mentioned recognizing the size of your brand and what you can actually give, like what is actually sustainable for your team so you don't burn out. Like it might be the best idea in the entire world, but if you don't have the bandwidth to follow through, then I feel like that could be really detrimental to the brand image in general, but also you're not able to put everything in that you wanted in terms of stewardship when it's something that you obviously care about.
Yeah, that's such a critical piece. And how much money do you have? How much time do you have? Do you have the platforms and the infrastructure within your brand to, say, promote that beautiful piece of content that you created? Like I think you have to really think about all of the different things that you have at your fingertips, what resources you have, and make sure that it is aligned with what's feasible and what you, again, can do really well, rather than trying to just do a sprinkle of things that maybe make just a couple tiny little bubbles of impact out there.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a hard shift. Not really that hard, but kind of just moving in a different direction for the conversation. And it is about all of the different areas. So you mentioned that Onyx, you started with hunting, but then you started moving into things like overlanding, I think that's the right term, and like human-powered adventures. And I think something that I have talked about on the show before and something that can often be missed when we are out recreating is that we all are using a lot of the same space and similar spaces, and we should not necessarily be fighting with each other for these spaces. Like, how can we, with different user groups, it doesn't really matter what you do, if you paddle, horseback ride, hike, whatever, how can we come together on a more united front to address these concerns with access and stewardship?
Yeah, so this is a topic that I honestly hadn't been super involved in or thought a ton about before coming to Onyx, but now this role has provided me this opportunity to like think so much bigger than I ever thought before, which has been amazing. And earlier this summer, we hosted a symposium in Bozeman where we gathered athletes, advocates, writers, nonprofit leaders across all three of our verticals, so hunting, off-roading, and overlanding, and human-powered sports, like all of those realms. And we did a day of trail maintenance together on the trails of Bozeman and gathered in a beautiful venue for a whole day to discuss those really hard and sticky access and stewardship topics of today and really talk about where our different user groups intersect. It was fascinating to get such a variety of people together with different lived experiences, different political views, different sport cultures, and really dig into what those differences are and where they originated from and find commonalities too. And we dug into perceptions of each user groups and found a lot more common ground than we actually thought, which was really neat. And ultimately kind of closed out the day by brainstorming like how we can work together. So I truly feel like it was one of those experiences where we learned to get out of our own way and really expand our thoughts and come together in a solution-oriented way that was really quite beautiful. And so a few takeaways that we all had coming out of the symposium and perhaps some takeaways for your audience of things that we learned in this process of like, gosh, no one's ever really done this before. Like, what's going to happen when you put a skier and a hunter together in a room and like let them go at it, you know? But that didn't happen. Like so many beautiful conversations happened. So I think a few key takeaways is to approach this all with empathy and that we are all simply looking to play outside. You know, and we come from different backgrounds that got us into certain sports for whatever reason. But at the end of the day, we're all just looking to have that recreational experience on our public land. So I think empathy can really help guide our understanding. Also, perception is only part real. Perhaps perceptions do originate from some semblance of truths, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, not all of this type of user is this thing. You know, we need to kind of break free of those perceptions that we have in our minds about somebody that's different than us and approach them with a bit more of an open mind. Again, that perhaps we're more alike than we are different. Another takeaway was that being face-to-face is great for these types of conversations. As we sat in a room and had these really, really, fascinating conversations about how to move our recreational industries forward together. And it's so hard sometimes in our digital world when we're on social media and behind screens, and oftentimes that communication becomes miscommunication. So just being face-to-face was like so nice. And I encourage all of us, while maybe not having the opportunity to go to something like a symposium, when, say, you're a hiker and you cross that mountain biker on a trail, like just give that wave, to say hello, to ask how their day was. I think even just simple human-to-human interactions like that can really go a long way to break down some of these barriers. And then lastly, I would say it's really important to try to get involved with your local land management agencies and issues. You know, pay attention to what changes in travel management plans are coming about in your backyard or the places you like to recreate. Write in for public comment when those opportunities arise. Or do things like join a local cleanup. Like those are all great ways to be more in the know of what's happening to your backyard public lands and really connect to what's happening around you. So all in all, if this was a fascinating like microcosm, this event, and we all learned so much and really came out of it with so much hopefulness of, okay, there's a lot of appetite for different user groups working together. And Onyx is starting to figure out how to fund some of those projects that really get a lot of different user groups together at a table and move some of these conversations forward. So we were really, really proud to have hosted that event, and hopefully more events like that to come in the future for us.
Yeah, the symposium sounds so amazing and fun, I guess, to hear all those different perspectives. I think it's really easy for people to be more critical of another group when you could be looking for the common ground instead, like you were saying. And something that I was thinking about while you were talking is this seems really relevant to individuals, but how would this kind of apply to a larger brand or industry message? Because even when you look at the industry as a whole, I feel like we are sectioned off like pretty strongly, like even in media and like the clothing brands that we buy. So if we are trying to have a stronger intersection, do you think it's possible on like a larger industry scale?
I do think it's possible, and that is exactly one of the problems that we're trying to solve at Onyx, actually. And we feel like we are a brand that can do this authentically because we make products for so many different user groups, right? If you're a brand that only makes products for one thing, like it might be a little bit harder to lead some of these conversations, but absolutely you should be involved in them, right? So I think it's like asking yourself, which user groups do I serve as a brand, and how do I really best get involved? But yeah, these are the hard conversations that we are having at Onyx too, right? How can we help? How can we use our brand for good, knowing that we serve a very large variety of people, and how do we integrate that into our brand messaging and have just a kind of a new day at Onyx, right? Like we're not serving hunters in exclusivity anymore. We have a much wider target audience. So what do we do with that? I don't have all the answers yet. We're really working through a lot of that brand work right now, but we definitely want to continue to contribute and try new things and take those risks as we try to bring different folks together and come together and really do work that can support, again, going back to our mission, like how do we inform our consumers about what responsible recreation is and inspire good stewardship that ultimately helps to protect our access to our public land. So yeah, I think you bring up a fascinating question and something that I really hope other brands can hop on board with too and figure out what their contribution levers really are and move forward with that.
Yeah, I think keeping that conversation alive is really powerful and a good way to just learn and grow as a brand. And I think with the different areas of outdoor recreation, like you mentioned, there's often these perceptions or these things that like when we come across a mountain biker when we're hiking, we automatically have this reaction, maybe because of past experiences, but a lot of times because preconceived notions. And part of that also, I think, has to do with who has access to what when we are recreating. Like maybe there is one trail section that only mountain bikers can use, or there's one trail section that is just for equestrians or something like that. So when we're thinking about all of these different user groups, do you think it will ever be possible for us as a collective to embrace that we should still protect all of the public lands when we may lose some of them to a different sport, I guess, for the gain of someone or something else?
Yeah, this question is so tricky and I love it so much. And my instinct answer is, I don't know if we'll ever really be able to, like, as a human, embrace the fact that I just lost something, like when those moments of lost access come about. I think it's, first of all, there's a lot of reasons of why we lose access to public lands for various reasons. Some of those include our overuse, and we have trash trails, which is a problem that we've all seen in the last few years, especially. Sometimes there's just a lack of funding and management of our public lands. Sometimes it's for the protection of endangered species or low animal populations or restoration from natural disasters, things like floods and fire, or seasonal closures can be a cause for animal calving or migrations. And sometimes there's a lot of legalities and litigation that happens that changes the land designation, that pushes one user group's access out of the equation. For example, making a parcel of land a capital W wilderness area oftentimes eliminates access for the motorized consumer, whether that's an off-roader or a snowmobiler. So there's pros and cons. I think it's really easy to tell ourselves we can look broadly and understand that lost access for me is a gain for someone else and that there's that balance happening, right? But I think where it gets really sticky is when this happens to our backyard trails. Like that's when it stabs you in the gut a bit, because you're like, gosh, sometimes for generations we've loved this particular trail system and now we don't have that anymore. And like, that's where it really becomes more personal and a bit more heart-wrenching. But I do think that the more we all understand access and potential reasons for access, or for lost access, and the more we understand land management and how agencies work together and all of these good things, the more we can see that big picture of pro and con and shift and, overall protection of our earth and our public lands, the more then we can embrace like the other side of the coin, so to speak. So it's not always easy, especially when it is those personal moments, like I mentioned. But I think education is really key. And, overall, we hope that we don't lose a lot of recreational access. But at the end of the day, sometimes it does happen to protect something else. So yeah, I think I just encourage us all to kind of see bigger around that and try to embrace the larger story that might be going on outside of what it means for me.
Yeah, and I think it's natural to have an emotional reaction, especially if it's a big part of your life or something like that, and grieving it properly in whatever way is healthy for you, but also having that sense of empathy, like you were saying, to be like, this is for a reason that is not like specifically attacking me or my user group.
Yes, agreed.
So a lot of really great insights happening right now and a lot for me to think about and digest. So did you have any other things that you wanted to share in the realm of stewardship or this conversation in general?
Before I came to Onyx, I didn't realize how much I took our public lands for granted. It's a truly special thing here in America that we have access to all of these public lands. And now every single time I head out, I try to be super aware of the lands that we have and the ground that I'm recreating on, and just be a little bit more intentional in my thoughts there and my gratitude for it. Public lands have given me so many memories and so many experiences. And I can't even imagine where I would be if I hadn't had outdoor experiences in my life. They truly have shaped me and grounded me and made me wiser and much more humble, all while empowering me in every way that I am most proud of as a human. We really are all in this together, whether you're activating your own individual self or are a marketer like me working on behalf of a brand. We all have strengths to give to this cause, and there is no right way to be the best steward. I would simply say, stay awakened to how you can give back in meaningful ways and do something. Do one good thing today and another good thing tomorrow.
Yeah, I love that. I say this way too much, but maybe not enough, is just start with what you have. And I mean, all of the things that you talked about throughout this conversation about like finding your strength as a brand and identifying all of that is also relevant to the individual. It's like, what can I do within my community or even within my personal life that can contribute to either this conversation of stewardship or like really practical, tangible pieces of land management and conservation?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we all have different things to give. And I like to call it our personal capital. Like, do we have money to give? Do we have time to give? Do we have social reach to give? Do we have influence within an organization, a company, a nonprofit to give? There's no right way. There's all of those things collectively make up a movement to get us to the next step and to move us forward. So yeah, I love that you're thinking in that way too. And I very much wholeheartedly agree. Just figure out what you can do and do that thing.
Exactly. It's all important and it's all relevant. So how can people learn more about Onyx and all of your stewardship efforts, or even just connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find Onyx at onyxmaps.com, and you can explore lots of things on there. You can dig into interactive maps. You can read our blogs. There's tons of tutorials, and you can download the apps from there as well. If you are interested in checking them out, you can do a free trial to check it out before you purchase. So that's a fun thing too. So onyxmaps.com. And then you can also find us on social media and all the usual ways at Onyx Hunt, Onyx Off-Road, or Onyx Backcountry. And then you can find me personally at RJ Marcelliano on Instagram. I would love to connect.
Awesome. I'll be sure to share all those links in the episode notes. So if people want to check them out, they can. And I'm glad that you shared general access to the maps, because I was going to ask you if there was like a free version of the maps or if it all was behind a paywall.
It's not all behind a paywall. There are free trials for 7 days. You can download any of the apps and get the full feature set for that time. So take it out for a spin and see what you think and poke around. There's so many features in there to explore. And then we have a few different tiers of our apps too. So depending on your budget and what features you want, there's a couple different ways to buy in if and when you're ready.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. This is a really fun conversation to have with you.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can still find me on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book for daily updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with a shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.